All right, I'm Christopher Friedel, and I'm here with Elliot. We're at the Texas Blockchain Summit, and we're gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about what you're in the process of building, who you're here to meet, and just kind of your backstory.
Sure. Yeah, so pleasure to be here. So far, really amazing event. As you mentioned, I'm Elliot David. I'm the head of climate strategy and partnerships with the Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol. So what we're setting out to do is essentially help the Bitcoin network and Bitcoin as an asset class become a powerful climate positive tool and accelerate the clean energy transition.
So the couple of buzzwords there.
A lot of buzzwords, yeah.
All right, so let's dig into it a little bit. What do you see as sustainable?
Sure. And so at the end of the day, right, sustainability, and having worked in the climate and sustainability space for the last 10 years or so, it's always a matter of comparison. It's always compared to what? So, for example, some folks might say that, hydro is not clean or nuclear is not clean, right? I personally think it is, and we at SBP think it is. But it's always a question of compared to what? Even methane mining, right? Like using waste methane gas can, to an insane degree, reduce CO2 equivalents. It could be one of the most powerful tools we have in reducing short-term emissions and giving ecosystems enough time to adapt to climate change. But there are some folks who would say that any use of methane or any kind of hydrocarbon is a bad idea. So at SBP, what we've done is we've developed a market-based mechanism that rewards miners for using and deploying clean energy sources. So rather than saying, like for example in New York, you're going to have a moratorium, instead of going that route, if you're a Bitcoin miner that's using and deploying clean energy, you're providing a service not only to securing the network, but also to the clean energy transition, right? To the development of clean energy infrastructure. So we believe that you should be paid for that activity.
Where is that reward coming from? Where's the payment coming from?
So what we do is we essentially first verify the clean energy consumption of miners, and miners are increasingly interested in actually proving that they're using clean energy, right? We don't believe in trust. We want to verify everything, proof of work. So a miner will be using clean energy. For example, CleanSpark is one of our early partners. They're using clean energy out in Georgia. Then every time they win a block, every time they earn a reward, they win a Bitcoin, we will send them a separate instrument, a separate asset called a Sustainable Bitcoin Certificate, which is effectively an on-chain representation that a Bitcoin was mined sustainably. Now, the reason why this is valuable, the reason why it's a powerful incentive, is because the miner can then sell that on to institutional investors, asset managers, anybody that wants to hold Bitcoin in a verifiably climate positive way without touching Bitcoin, without disrupting fungibility. Like, we believe Bitcoin should be Bitcoin. We're maxis. But this way you have an auditable path to holding Bitcoin from an investor perspective that can pass any kind of carbon audit, any kind of SEC disclosure. And so essentially, if you're a miner that's using clean energy or verified clean energy, it's free money. So you're getting paid for that activity.
Is there a market currently for it? Or are there?
So in terms of our development and where we are, there isn't a market yet. We're currently doing a pilot with CleanSpark and BlockFusion, among a few other really awesome miners. So working with some really, really fantastic miners. But yeah, we hope to develop this market pretty quickly. What's nice about Bitcoin is that as an asset class, it's actually quite straightforward. It's code and energy. So in the short term, we expect to have about 10% of global hash rate committed to the protocol by 2023. So 10% of all global Bitcoin mining. And then as this scales, it's also going to inform a narrative shift, right? We're going to change the narrative around Bitcoin mining and demonstrate that it actually is really powerful climate positive technology, that it's actually contributing to the clean energy transition and moving away from all the FUD and misrepresentations of the network.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at the energy space, there's a misunderstanding of how much energy is available, where it's available, understanding from a geographic perspective as well as from a time perspective. There's a mismatch right now as far as understanding in the space. And it seems like there are several players that are looking to educate, that are looking to shift that narrative, if you were, as people become better versed in how energy flows, how electrons flow, and so now when you're talking about being able to bring that worldwide, What does that mean to you? How does that play out?
Sure. So we, a global protocol. We will service any Bitcoin miner anywhere in the world that's using clean energy. For now, we're focusing on North America in our early days, just because that's where most of the hash rate is. But as you mentioned, right, like most people don't understand or appreciate how energy, how electricity, or even power markets function. You flip on a light switch and your lights turn on, but you're not thinking about how those electrons get to you. And in fact, a lot of miners actually don't fully appreciate how those electrons flow either, which I can get to in a little bit. But so and this is me speaking personally, I think Bitcoin mining can be an incredible catalyst for decentralizing, greening, and making all grids much, much more efficient. And what actually brought me into the space was not, the notion of freedom money. It was not sovereignty. And that's all very important and, obviously really critical.
Well, everybody has their own journeys, right?
Everybody has their own journey.
Very, very common. So it sounds like you've got a little bit different path there.
And so what brought me into the space is, I've been working in climate sustainability for the last 10 years or so. And when Hurricane Maria and Irma, when they hit Puerto Rico in 2017, the island's grid was totally destroyed, right? I think something like 60 people died in the hurricane, but thousands of people died as a result of the hurricane. Most people don't appreciate that. It's because the grid was out, so hospitals were down, schools were down, water filtration was down. Like, energy is the most basic infrastructure that all life on Earth, or I should say all human life really on Earth needs to sort of thrive and grow and develop. And so when that happened, right, there was the energy crisis in Puerto Rico. I went to go work for the Department of Energy. This was during the Rick Perry, President Trump administration. Working across some of the different offices, looking and researching the issue. And then after working for President Trump, I went to go work for President Clinton at his foundation. And there I was directly focused on solarizing small island developing states, including Puerto Rico. And pretty quickly what you notice is that it makes absolutely zero sense why these developing economies do not have abundant clean energy and flexible grids. So just to take Puerto Rico as an example, at the time, this was 2017, I think the average Puerto Rican was paying about 27 cents a kilowatt hour. And compared to the average mainland U.S. citizen, it's more than double what we pay. Keep in mind that Puerto Rican...
It's only gotten worse.
And it's only gotten worse. Yeah. Today in 2022, I think it's like 35, 36 cents.
Yeah.
So
they just bumped to...
Three times what the average American is paying for electricity.
Yep.
And this is largely because most of Puerto Rican energy comes from imported diesel fuel. So the grid in 2017 was almost 100% fossil-based, despite the fact that Puerto Rico is one of the sunniest, windiest places in the U.S., right? And then on top of that today, it's maybe like 3 or 4% renewables. So we really haven't changed much. And so when I was at the foundation, one of the solutions we were trying to come up with is microfinancing to basically help build out renewables like solar and wind. But we kept on running into the same problem, right? And that is, it's not economical to build out intermittent renewable power unless you have a flexible buyer of energy. And I kick myself all the time. Once a day, I think about this. If I could go back in time, I would go to President Clinton. I would go to the foundation. I would say, hey, there are these weirdos making magic internet money with these machines. We should send some of these to Puerto Rico. And who knows? Maybe we would be in a different position today. So I think the future of the grid in Puerto Rico, one of the key solutions that we have actually could be Bitcoin mining.
No, it makes sense. I mean, if you're able to, if they're able to monetize it, if they're able to monetize the energy that's being produced, and come up with a solution that bridges that gap between the demand and the production, that's really what you're looking to do with.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm an economist by training, and so if I see a mismatch of supply and demand, there's a few different reasons why that can happen, right? It could be government intervention, it could be information asymmetry. In this case, as you pointed out, the grid has to have supply and demand meeting each other. And so what's amazing about Bitcoin mining, and this is, again, what brought me into the space, was the unique way that Bitcoin mining buys power. It's totally location agnostic. It's totally flexible. You see some miners that are doing ramp up, ramp down in seconds, compared to like, I don't know, a factory that'll take days, right? It's a really unique, energy technology. And so what's cool if you think about like where this is going to go in the future, right? As you mentioned, most energy is wasted, either through transmission or curtailment. So Bitcoin miners are naturally going to go after all this waste energy.
And the thing on the wasted energy is that the more energy that you waste, the less you can produce, the less capital will move into the space.
Right.
And one of the challenges in Puerto Rico, and like you mentioned, there can be multiple reasons for mismatch,
right.
And Puerto Rico has.
It's not the one silver bullet solution, but it's a big part of it.
It has a few challenges for
right.
sure. But I think we were talking before, government. There's some really good interests that are down there trying to get things built out. But it really is, if you're in the U.S. and you have easy access to power, I think what you were talking about before is even some miners don't understand or don't appreciate where the energy is coming from, the impacts to the grid, the impacts on demand, what type of energy they're using. Now some do, and that's a competitive advantage that they built into their system.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And actually, there was an article recently. I gave a quote to, I think, Cointelegraph, who I believe is one of the sponsors of one of the media partners of the event here. And this was, I think, months ago, and they said that Bitcoin miners are going to have to adopt new strategies to be sustainable in the long term. This was before, the FTX crap out and the market kind of imploded. But
no kind of about it. It imploded.
It imploded. I'm being diplomatic. But they were talking about how these miners, the ones that are thinking about this, they're being diligent about their procurement when it comes to energy. They're thinking about sustainability both from a business and an environmental perspective. Those are the ones that are doing really well. So fortunately, a lot of our mining partners, like Aspen Creek, CleanSpark, Block Fusion, BitDeer, like they are doing really well. Again, because they're thinking about this business sustainability component. I know as an economist, we're not supposed to make causal claims, or I should say monocausal claims, but I think anybody that would look at the market and say, oh wow, if you're really thinking hard and sincerely about your energy, you're probably getting really good rates. You know that renewable energy is only getting more and more competitive. There's an abundant, most of the wasted energy happens to be curtailed renewables, hydro and nuclear. So it's a natural fit. It's a natural fit.
It's not, I think people, when they think of energy, they think of it as, I think when I first started looking at the space, they'll say, well, energy price is X. And that's only half the picture. Energy price is X in certain geographic locations. And so if you go to some place that's, has high renewables, there's that could be a fraction of it. You go to some place where it doesn't have access, that's importing diesel for their energy, it's going to be triple the price.
Right.
And I think that's something to truly appreciate and understand. You have to understand to be able to appreciate what it takes to reduce that price in energy.
Right. And I think a point that I was talking briefly with Nick Carter before, and we were talking about how like energy first miners are doing really, really well. Mm-hmm. And it's because they're thinking about these things. Bitcoin's inherently, it's an energy native asset, right? Like proof of work, it really might as well just be called proof of energy consumption, Yeah. And I think what's interesting is like the Puerto Rico example. Puerto Rico is not the only place where this is happening. If you think about where are the locations with the most abundant renewable potential, lowest rates of renewable penetration, highest rates of digital exclusion, financial exclusion, that's Latin and South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia. So all of these different trends, like you could actually address a lot of these problems with one amazingly powerful climate technology, and that's Bitcoin.
And as it's, I think as that gets developed and people understand it, then it can really increase the quality of living worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so it really is interesting as you get into the space. You dive into the space. It's like you peel back an onion, and there's another layer, and
oh man,
and you get down to
the rabbit hole is never ending. Even in energy, and that's I think there's a lot of really nice parallels between energy and Bitcoin. I mean, obviously Bitcoin's an energy native asset, but the fact that it's so multifaceted, the fact that has this inherent fungibility principle, which I know we talked a little bit about. The fact that an electron is an electron. Once it comes on the grid, it's impossible to distinguish where the electron came from. Same thing with Bitcoin, right? Like a Bitcoin in my pocket has to be the same as a Bitcoin in your pocket, or wallet, I should say. And so that also creates certain consequences, though, around energy procurement. A lot of miners think they might be consuming clean energy when in fact they're not, and that's also something I think the industry has to overcome.
Do you see any? You're seeing it as the way that the industry overcomes it is by integration with your protocol and
right. So I mean, and like, you could be a total free market capitalist, libertarian even. You can buy and consume the energy that you want, right? But here's the thing: as Bitcoiners, we don't believe in trust. We believe you verify everything, right? I want to see the proof of work. I want to see the proof of action, whatever you want to call it. And if you're a Bitcoin miner that is making a claim that you're using clean energy, if you're saying I'm not using any clean energy, it's fine. Power to you. I'm using, I don't know, gas in upstate New York. Like I can't do anything to discourage you, nor should I, maybe. But if you're making a claim, you need to be able to back up that claim. And so the problem with a lot of the claims that are being made nowadays, and this is especially interesting if you look at the Bitcoin Mining Council and some of these other reporting mechanisms, is that some miners don't realize that when you buy electricity, you also need to be buying the environmental attributes of that electricity in order to make a claim. So the way that everybody pretty much in the entire world buys clean energy is they buy those electrons, and then they buy these attributes, either through RECs or GOs or whatever, which is also not a perfect system. But what it does is it allows you to actually attribute the greenness of power to a particular consumer. You have what's called market-based accounting. And so even if you are a miner that is situated right next to a solar plant, and this happens all the time, right, because you want to mop up those excess electrons, you're not able to make a claim to the solar, right, to the greenness of that electricity, unless you're holding those attributes.
Right.
What ends up happening is Amazon, Google, Microsoft are buying the cleanness of this electricity from these producers, and ironically, Bitcoin miners are sometimes making a double claim, right? They're double spending that attribute. So the way that you solve that is just miners should prove the work, right? If you're positively contributing to the clean energy transition, buying clean power, you should shout that from the rooftops.
Now, or do you see that as you see it as a market pricing two Bitcoins at the same time? There's the ESG Bitcoin, and then there's you're looking at it. Are you looking at it as a value? Are you looking at it as a value add on top of the existing, more of like a credit structure, a green credit?
It's similar to a REC, if you're familiar, or like a credit mechanism. To be very clear, Bitcoin needs to be Bitcoin needs to be Bitcoin. So if you're making a green Bitcoin or a red Bitcoin, that's not good. We don't want to bifurcate. The same way that the dollars in my pocket, I have no idea if the dollars in my pocket were used to buy weapons or something like that. Each dollar has to be worth each other. But if I'm bifurcating Bitcoin, if I'm saying this Bitcoin is green and this one's not, huge problem. The entire system breaks down. So the really elegant solution that our co-founders came up with is the same way that in electricity markets, you can separate electricity from its environmental attributes. You can also separate Bitcoin from sustainable Bitcoin mining. So the way that we work is if you're a Bitcoin miner, you're using clean energy, you basically first demonstrate you're using clean energy, whether it's renewables, hydro, nuclear, geothermal, waste methane gas.
Kind of go through the certification process.
Yeah, it's proving, again, Bitcoin miners should welcome this, right? We believe in proof of work. We want to be able to show that we're doing the right thing or advancing the clean energy transition. And once you do that, you will be issued automatically a separate instrument that institutional investors, so the Goldmans, Fidelities, BlackRocks of the
Kevin
world,
O'Leary.
ETP, even Kevin O'Leary. So like Kevin O'Leary, interestingly, and this is very, very interesting. I hope I don't get into trouble for this, but like Kevin O'Leary wants to basically find Bitcoin mines that are undeniably green. So hydro mine in Norway, I don't think there's any fossil generation in Norway. They produce a ton of oil and they just ship it elsewhere, and they're pretty much entirely hydro. So if I mine Bitcoin at that mine, at that hydro mine, I'm pretty much guaranteed that that particular coin was green. The problem is, what he's saying he's going to do is he's going to take Bitcoin, hold it in his wallet, and basically promise, I'm never going to move this Bitcoin. It's like a store of value, right?
Yep.
And it's a green Bitcoin, and because I'm never moving it, I know it'll always be green. My portfolio will always be green. One, that would never pass a carbon audit, which I know is a big concern of his. And two, you're effectively disrupting fungibility because now you have this coin that it's supposed to be totally liquid, supposed to go anywhere, but now it's
the Kevin O'Leary killing.
Yeah, well, and listen, I have a lot of respect for Kevin O'Leary. I think he said some pretty unusual things after this whole FTX debacle. But he's a smart guy.
Yep.
I think what we're doing actually would be an ideal solution for that, because you can hold Bitcoin in an auditably climate positive way. So if I have a Bitcoin on my balance, and then I am also holding this separate instrument that says that a Bitcoin was mined sustainably, then if it's an SEC disclosure, if it's a CDP disclosure, I know that my portfolio is now climate positive. So I'm holding Bitcoin in a way that I've actually contributed more to clean energy development than my one Bitcoin could have ever possibly consumed.
Which then gives you access to different capital markets that
50 trillion of ESG capital we want to move that into Bitcoin mining and clean energy. That's our agenda.
Right. So it's I think people can wish that it didn't exist, or that it shouldn't, that there shouldn't be a bifurcated market versus ESG versus non.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is it does exist, and so capitalize on it. And you're saying, hey, here's a way for us to capitalize on that market existing. We're not saying whether it's right or wrong for that to exist. It's just it does, and so there needs to be an efficient mechanism to tap into that.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's like some solutions out there, some folks out there have said okay, why don't we just buy credits or RECs or whatever, and we'll compensate for the environmental footprint of our holdings. I think that's I don't think that's the best approach. I think it's a start, right? And actually some miners are already kind of doing this. But one, that doesn't inspire behavioral change, right? That doesn't actually drive miners to use and deploy clean energy sources. And then two, it's a missed opportunity. So through our protocol, what we aim to do is not just help, compensate for the environmental footprint of Bitcoin, but actually drive the network towards climate positivity and mobilize billions and billions of dollars of capital towards new clean energy development that I can then say, okay, Bitcoin was responsible for this clean energy infrastructure. It was responsible for this development and financing. So
it's a financial incentive to make that transition.
Yeah, I'm an economist. As much as I can tell people until I'm blue in the face that they should care about climate change, they should want to use primarily clean energy sources, I can do that until I'm blue in the face, right? But at the end of the day, it's not going to get us there in time. Incentives are what drive people. Incentives are what drive behavior. And what's important is you can't just make a solution that, a sort of environmental nut job like me is gonna use and appreciate. I need anybody that cares about money. Yeah,
incentives,
exactly. If I have to tell you to do it, then it's not going to work. But if it's in your own best interest, then yeah, it's good for everybody. It's good for the miners. It's good for the investors. It's good for clean energy developers, energy companies. It's good for everybody.
And it seems like when you're looking at from the ESPG perspective and making sure that that's clean energy, that's very much that's very much something that people who have excess energy can talk about.
Right.
I think when you're looking at Africa and some of those places that have zero energy, and you're saying, hey, you either get clean energy or you get no energy. I think that's the challenge that people are going to take exception to. And it seems like if you can give access, if you can say, well, we'll still give you, you are going to get that energy development. This capital that's going in there. on the ESG side can be used to get energy development in other areas.
Absolutely. It's not just the clean energy financing, it's also a matter of process, where that money goes. So just from the protocol perspective, we are going to be mobilizing so much capital towards clean energy development through this market that we can be strategic, surgical about where that financing is going. So we could identify projects that are going to be the most impactful. So instead of investing in clean energy development in Washington State, where it's already a pretty developed market, I can instead focus on West Virginia, or I could focus on Montana, right? I can go to markets where energy justice that we talked about in the beginning, like people often, even in America, there's people who don't have access to clean and reliable electricity. I could finance that clean energy development through this protocol. And I'm also really glad that you brought up the Africa piece. And I've been advising some policymakers, lawmakers across Mexico, Colombia, El Salvador, Rwanda, Nigeria, sort of all over. And I think this could be a tool to decolonize their clean energy supply chains. So we were talking about Puerto Rico before as...
What do you mean by decolonize?
So what ends up happening is we end up extracting a lot of materials from, we'll call it global south countries, or developing economies, right, which tend to be below the equator or in the global south. We tend to extract materials from these countries, build out clean energy infrastructure or any kind of infrastructure, and then hold it to ourselves, right? But as you pointed out, we're saying we're doing that, and then at the same time turning to these countries and saying, why aren't you building out solar and wind, when in fact we've made it a lot harder for them. One of the big reasons why renewable energy development is so slow and so behind in the places in the world that have the most abundant sun and wind is because there's not a reliable off-taker. There's not flexible demand. So my ambitious vision is Bitcoin mining with renewables and other clean energy sources across Latin and South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia, and coupling that with digital inclusion and internet enablement. So what you effectively are doing is you're solving what I call the infrastructure trilemma: energy poverty, the digital divide, and financial exclusion. Once you solve those three, people are then able to lift themselves up, right? They don't need all these other inputs and interferences, right? They don't need these interventions. It's enabling infrastructure like energy, internet, and finance that runs the world. So we can solve for that using things like Bitcoin mining.
That's an aggressive
very ambitious.
Object.
I sound like a crazy man, but listen, 5 years from now, we'll do this again, and we'll see if I'm right.
That's great. So now, where do people go to connect with you, to get plugged into with what you guys are doing?
So they could follow us. Our website's sustainablebtc.org. We have LinkedIn. We have Twitter. I think sustainablebtc is our handle.
And then who are you looking typically to meet? Who's a good person to plug in with you?
So, I'm the sort of tip of the spear when it comes to a lot of our engagement with miners, environmental groups, policymakers, energy companies. In particular, miners that want to work with us. And I know in the bear market, we've been seeing a lot of interest because depressed prices mean they want to diversify their revenue streams. Mm-hmm. So if you're a miner using verified clean energy, we'll get you free money. If you're an investor that wants to...
That's a good pitch.
That's a great pitch. It's a very easy
that is
sell.
An effective incentive.
It's a very easy sell for a miner that's using verified clean energy, right? If you're also an investor, so you're an institutional that cares about the climate, you want to hold Bitcoin in an auditably, verifiably climate positive way, that's also really important. We're looking to talk with, some of the ETFs, CTPs, if Grayscale or, one of those groups wanted to work with us, that would be, if Grayscale converted their trust into a climate positive trust, it would generate enough clean energy financing probably to get Puerto Rico entirely to 100% renewable.
You'd have a little bit of an uproar in the... You might have a little bit of an
so some folks, that's a little spicy. But yeah, so we're looking to work with the miners, the investors, anybody who cares about the planet, who cares about Bitcoin. We're happy to work with anybody. We're a voluntary mechanism, non-coercive. Yeah, we believe in freedom of choice in that regard.
Awesome. Thanks for stopping by, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, really great.
I'm Lee Bratcher, the president of the Texas Blockchain Council. Thank you to everyone who came out to this year's summit, helping us make it the best one yet. Now more than ever, we need professional industry associations like the TBC to help craft effective policy instead of the CEOs of centralized exchanges roaming the halls of various state capitals or in DC. Texas is quickly becoming the center of the universe for Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets. If you want to be part of the future that we are crafting here in Texas, join the TBC today.